You know, a lot of people are calling me the Sully Sullenberger of local news because just like how Sully saved 155 souls by landing the plane in the Hudson, I'm saving local news by landing it on the internet. Welcome to Toronto, the Politics, the show. I'm Christopher Chiasson. Mr. Dan Seljak of Another Glass Box is on the show today. Dan is a very intelligent thinker and writer when it comes to Toronto's urban planning. He was part of the team of organizers in opposition to the condo development application affecting the beloved emo and trivia spot, Sneaky Dee's. The application was suddenly withdrawn last week after a surprising letter from one of the businesses in the area. On this episode, Dan explains what exactly is going on and why Sneaky Dee's might not be safe for long. Dan Seljak, thanks so much for coming to the show today. How's your day been? You just came back from Sneaky Dee's, right?
Yeah, I've been there virtually every day, I think, for about a week or so. Yeah, it's been good.
Worst places to hang around.
Worst places to hang around. Unfortunately, a place that's going to be around for a good while longer as of Friday. So...
You know, yeah. I do owe you a thank you. I think as many folks who, lived around Toronto, especially pre-pandemic when I was, in school and doing a lot of trivia, Sneaky Dee's was a local haunt. So I owe you a thank you. I mean, maybe I'll ask you. So what's the current status of Sneaky Dee's right now as of today?
Well, I mean, it's a little weird because we call it a win because the specific development application that was in and was going to be voted on the 8th is... dead in the water. But I mean, all of the same pressures that Sneaky Dee's was facing kind of still exist. Like it's a month-to-month lease with a landlord that's looking to redevelop the site. It is, difficult in this current economic climate for all small venues, but, commercial venues generally really struggle with the fact that commercial protections in Ontario are pretty lenient. So like whether it comes to rent increases or evictions or the fact that there's just no standardized leases at all for commercial space, they're not in the clear. I wouldn't say. I would say they're safe from a specific development application, but they're not saved.
So walk me through this. The Sneaky Dee's, there's been a development application in place for years now at this point, right? There's been a sign that the application for rezoning went through. Don't believe it made too much of a fuss at council when that application went through, correct? And it hasn't been until recently that it feels like there's been more of a community groundswell. And then you had many activists, folks ready to speak, activists, maybe, community members ready to speak and depute. And then that was canceled because there was a letter that was received, I guess, by Diane Sachs or by council, by RBC, saying that the supposed land assembly for this condo that was going to be built had just never actually been assembled, that the corporation that had put forward the application hadn't actually done their due diligence. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's weird. I'll kind of go back to the start. So like the development application goes in the first time, it goes through. To say that there was no community resistance, I think is not true, which my understanding, like there was like a pretty significant kind of fight. But I don't know why they didn't get the groundswell they needed to make and that was actually a point of, a little bit, I wouldn't say of contention, but there was like, a neighborhood group kind of being like, we already had this fight once. Like, do you guys want to like borrow our notes? And the group that I was working with, the Safe Sneaky Dee's kids, were basically like, well, no, we've got a different route of attack. That was not a cheery conversation, but it obviously yielded results. And so there was that kind of context. So it went through the development application since the start. If you look at the Urban Toronto forums, which are an incredible resource for things like this, people didn't really think it was going to be housing. They saw it as kind of a rezone and flip, which is basically a developer comes in, they rezone a bunch of land. Sometimes they own it, sometimes they don't. And then they sell that to someone who will actually build. So there was kind of speculation that that's what this was. This application was coming to the end of its viability. It basically expires and has to be resubmitted. They resubmitted at a larger size. And this time around, something that had happened that is kind of I think kind of the genesis for why this happened was Sneaky Dee's is now home to this event series called Emo Night North. And what that meant was that there was actually a very concentrated and activatable, you basically had Tinder for an actual community groundswell. So, you have this very close group of folks who share a subculture. They all came together all at once, showed up at committee, and suddenly there were like, 40 goths and punks and emo kids piled into a very straight-laced place. And where I came in was I recognized one of them from karaoke down the street, and I was like, I remember when I fought City Hall the first time. It sucked. Maybe I'll reach out to my friend Mac and see if they need some help. And so then I kind of got pulled in as a bit of a coach at first, and then I just can never help myself. I got pretty sucked into it.
So as of today, the application has been pulled. Sneaky Dee's is safe for now, but given the dynamics of development in Toronto, who knows? Any day now, there could be some other application received, and then Sneaky Dee's would be in the same situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of confusing thing about what happened specifically with Sneaky Dee's is like when that first application went in back in 2020, I think it was, the developer stated, I own all 5 parcels of land in this assembly. Well, as it turns out, they owned 2 out of the 5. The one that was like most important, which is the one right beside Sneaky Dee's, is actually owned by RBC. And so RBC then submitted a letter to the city, which went into the public record, like into the committee minutes.
Yeah.
That was like, no, you don't own this, and we're not going to sell to you, and we like Sneaky Dee's as a neighbor. They actually explicitly said that. They're like, we like Sneaky Dee's right where it is, and we've been living kind of a synergistic, Shark and Remora type relationship where people come and withdraw their money and go back in. I guess I don't know I don't know why they said that, but it was very nice.
I guess they do. Sneaky Dee's is primarily cash still, right? Yeah, they don't take any card. Yeah. Okay,
maybe I'm speculating.
That's conjecture.
Anyhow, yeah. So they were like, oh yeah, we love our neighbors. Basically, am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah. They basically said fuck off. And then 3 hours or so after that, the developer, through their planning firm, pulled their entire application. They just were like, okay, never mind, we withdraw. So like they weren't explicitly connected. Like the planning, the developer did not say, oh, because RBC came forwards, we are dropping out. But the timing is the timing exists.
I used to work with BIAs a lot, and I always found that the branch managers at banks were sneaky advocates for community development. Insofar as you didn't quite expect it, maybe, because I think we have this image of, maybe the corporation is a different story, but usually the folks who work in that branch, it's a funny thing because it ends up being a lot of office workers in an area where there isn't typically a lot of offices, is where a lot of community branches are. So you get this little community of daytime engaged folks who have a fairly good read of the situation. And maybe that's a lesson for folks in the future. I didn't even know about this assembly thing that they would just put forward applications just on a lark without even doing that sort of due diligence.
Well, so now, the form that they're supposed to submit either says I own the land, or I have notified the other landowners within this parcel and I have their consent with their signature thing. So what happened in this case was, if they had gone to the bank and the 3 other owners, I think it's 3 other owners, and gotten those signatures, they would have been in the clear. You can rezone other people's land. That's no problem. It was the fact that they said, I own all 5 in basically a sworn document. That's where they fell into trouble. And now we don't know what happens. This is actually kind of unprecedented, and there might be legal consequences. We don't know.
Against the applicant?
Yeah, because they effectively lied under oath on paper, whatever that is.
It sounds like making a fraudulent mortgage application or the like, and then to consider then the delay of counsel. You'd think there'd be some sort of law that you can't lie, towards the city. You'd hope that would be some law that exists, right?
Yeah, let's put it this way. I am not going to speculate on anything because I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to get in trouble.
I'll speculate. It's my show. I'm okay. I'll suffer the consequences. Yeah.
But Diane Sachs, who's the local counselor, is a lawyer and is like, let's put it this way. We had a lot of folks come out pretty early in support of this who are kind of urbanist activists who I kind of know, who might be like Gabe Blanc, for instance, is a...
Who's that?
Young guy going for council. Gabe Blanc is running in my ward, young urbanist type. He came out in support pretty early. Josh Matlow came out in support pretty early. Kai and Waleed are both running, I think, in Toronto Centre. Yeah. Like, we had a bunch of folks who are running for office or in office come out in support. But to Diane Sachs's credit, the local councillor she is a lawyer. And so the fact that she has smelled blood on this file, she's moving in ways I haven't seen her move before. It's kind of interesting from like an observer perspective. Because
what do you mean by that?
I've said some critical things about her in the past, and now she's moving very quickly, and she has some very strong insights into what can and should happen here. So I'm just I am kind of enjoying the drama of it all. To say the
I
least.
think that, what I bet Diane has noticed is that there is a competitive landscape in the ward. You mentioned Gabe. I think he has a lot of enthusiasm. The politically wise thing for Diane to do would be to find an issue that was very salient amongst young folks. And it feels like this Sneaky Dee's maybe fell in her lap. Plus, with the addition of just an applicant that wasn't very competent, seemed like it was a bit of a layup for her office. It sounds like the office, the team was pretty supportive throughout the whole process.
Pretty supportive, and I would say the other thing is, so I generally am known to be like I wouldn't say like a devoted YIMBY of any sort, but I have been known to kind of complain about NIMBYism, and I wanted to see more housing built, etc. And this
You beat me to it, Dan. You beat me to it.
This thing that I'm doing where I'm trying to stop a housing development was seen as kind of a betrayal by a lot of people. And the fact of the matter is that there is a lot of NIMBY sentiment in this ward, and what was just uncovered was a developer behaving, I would say, badly, and that feeds into a certain demographic who believes that all developers are liars, all developers are like, this is a very this applicant has basically done something. So I mean, other developers I've spoken to have kind of used the words like brazen or like, this is something so obviously weird that it is very easy to cast them as a villain and to extend that. Like, for an incumbent counselor to have kind of to be able to say that she uncovered it is it's dynamite. I don't know what else to say. Like, it's a pretty big deal. And I would say, as someone who was like involved in this process, I thought we were going to a meeting on Thursday, and we'd be rallying the community to show up in force, and then we would maybe get a deferral at best, and then it would go to the OLT, and we'd lose anyhow, and we would have made a lot of noise, and then we were going to do a crowdfunding campaign. I did not think we were actually going to stop the development, to be completely honest. I thought we were going to lose loudly in support of a local business, because the deck is stacked against stopping a development like this, the OLT being what it is, and with city council, like, it had a staff recommendation to go forward. City council doesn't like to go against staff. Like, I don't know. There was just like 100 reasons why I was pretty pessimistic about this and thought it was more of a yay local business campaign than an actual like effective way of stopping something.
Which can have its own benefits if they need to relocate. You've drummed up a lot of attention. People have a lot of goodwill. The condo application goes forward. They move. It's a good transition, and that's not, everything's fine. Dan, allow me to steel man let me put my Ezra Klein abundance hat on. YIMBY's pro supply side housing advocates for years have been complaining about these boomer NIMBYs stopping housing. That anytime there's housing, they show up in droves and they say, no, not here. It's not that I'm opposed to housing in general. It's just this location. And now, instead of it being, housing which belongs to wealthy boomers, now it is a space that is deemed cool by, Toronto's, alternative elite. Now all of a sudden it's a problem. Dan, aren't you just a NIMBY? Aren't you just a NIMBY by another shade of finger of nail polish? What am I trying to say here? Aren't you just a NIMBY by another aesthetic? What's the difference? Explain that to me.
So, like, I don't know if folks are familiar with my whole deal, but my focus recently has been on small independent businesses in the city, and I pushed very hard for, it started as trying to save a little corner store, and it turned into basically getting corner stores legalized across the city, and opening up zoning for this thing called Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods, EHON. So I would say I'm a pretty strong advocate for considered deregulation within neighborhoods. And in this case, what I think is happening is rather than being, a NIMBY where I'm saying no housing in my backyard, what I actually believe is what we call the yellow belt. So the stable single family homes that are kind of preserved in yellow on maps, aka the yellow belt. But basically these kind of neighborhoods held in stasis, effectively suburbanized between our main arterials, has resulted in the land on our arterials being worth so much that businesses actually can't bring in enough rent to pay for the land value. So like Sneaky Dee's is full. It sells out events all the time. It should, by all measures, be a successful place. But because you can't build anywhere else on the city except for the big main streets, the land that it sits on demands that it be developed. And that's a problem because it is much easier, and I think of a less significant detriment to society, for us to take down, 6 single family homes to build an apartment unit rather than an institution that's been around for almost 40 years, has birthed the careers of many artists, is the place where, Brian Lee O'Malley, it's not just the location of that's featured in Scott Pilgrim, but there was a zine effectively festival around there and in there where comic artists would congregate, and he actually was in that place. And, his talent was being nurtured there. Fiona Smith, another very famous comic artist from Toronto, drew the original murals on the walls. There is economic and cultural development happening on our main streets, and we are choosing to sacrifice it so that people can retain the value of their single family homes. And I think that's stupid.
There's such a big difference between saying we're going to knock down some low density single family homes to build more housing and saying we need to knock down this cultural institution to replace it with something else, to get rid of what has been a net positive to the community.
The way I've been phrasing it in kind of the most reductive way, and it's not a perfect phrasing, is replace the mundane with the mundane. We have houses, replace them with houses, replace them with way more houses. I don't care how many houses you replace them with. And the same goes for, chain commercial shops, whatever. There is at a certain point, though, a fact that we are making it very difficult for small businesses to exist on main streets. And, Sneaky Dee's, this is a criticism I actually got from an owner of a bar that I really love and go to frequently, was he was saying well, does my bar not pass the cool quota? Would I not get this support if my bar came under fire? And to that I say, I actually agree with you. I don't actually think it's Sneaky Dee's unique Sneaky Dee-ness that merits its protection. It's more the fact that all bars, all music venues, all cafes, all commercial businesses on main strips right now suffer from two things. One is the fact that the yellow belt makes the land that they are on way too expensive. And the second is that we have very lenient commercial protections in our province. So there's no standardized leases. There's no rent control. There's nothing. There's just you and your landlord. And if your landlord is a developer who has bought that land because they are the only type of person who can afford that type of land and they want to just do stuff to you, they can just do stuff to you. And I think that causes some real serious issues. The other thing I would say, sorry, I'm on a roll now.
Please do. It makes my job easy.
When you look at Canada's entire economy and we look at, I hate talking about the measure of productivity, but what we are doing with this zoning is basically placing a huge economic influence on people's investment in their single family homes. And we are de-emphasizing an emphasis on businesses that actually produce things on the main street. So the economic activity, the cultural activity that happens on your main street, you are making it harder for that to happen. And all you are doing is protecting the investment growth of the people who live between those main streets. And they get replaced with this thing that everyone complains about, but no one wants to do anything about, which is the dentist, bank, pharmacy, dentist, bank, pharmacy, gym, maybe these kind of monotonous storefronts we're getting. And that's because the only people who can afford rents in these giant units that go at the bottom of the condo buildings are either corporations or what they call stable anchor tenants. No one wants to take a risk on a music venue or hospitality venue when those things go out of business in the first year 60% of the time. You're not going to get a risk-taking landlord when your unit is that large and the landlord is taking on so much debt to build a brand new building. So
we talk about supporting small businesses, but the small business even having a chance to exist is dependent upon the commercial retail units being there. And it this trend towards these glass boxes. I just recently moved back from Calgary, and this is what would piss me off the most about the city was I don't know how any new aspiring restaurateur could open up their first restaurant in Calgary, because you immediately need to be able to populate a restaurant of 100 folks. Whereas, in Toronto, which has prioritized smaller CRUs, you can have a business, look at any of these cookie shops that pop up. You can have a business that's, can fit a couple of people, and you can actually have some vibrancy in there. And that's not what these massive condos, these luxury condos are wanting to put in because of the development costs.
Well, and I got into this fight with a lot of people around neighborhood retail specifically, where they were like, well, why do we need corner stores if the bottoms of the condos are so empty? And that's a great question, but you're actually not identifying the symptom and cause very well. Like, you see the empty units and you're like, why aren't more retailers in those units? Well, it's the wrong kind of retailer. You don't see mom and pop shops in those because they are too expensive. They're just, even if the price was decent by square foot, there's just so many square feet. Whereas, a mom and pop shop in a small corner store, like a normal house that just happens to have the ground floor converted to some sort of retail unit, that's much cheaper. So in order to, promote economic growth, cultural growth, there's also just this idea in sociology of, your cities versus your towns are kind of where subcultures grow. Like, you have this ability when you just have a concentration of people where there might only be one or two punks in your hometown, but you come to Toronto and there's thousands. And so they can sustain a punk bar like Sneaky Dee's, and they can grow their own subculture, and that can grow its own history. And, some folks have criticized, I saw some criticism actually on Gabe's recent post about Sneaky Dee's, about like, well, this building is only a little bit older than me at like nearly 40 years. Like, why would it get heritage status? And the reason I think, it merits at least consideration is subcultures are relatively young. Punk is not that old. It's a product of maybe the 1970s. So an institution being around for 40 years that has fostered a huge amount of Canadian punk talent might actually be much more valuable in that subculture than you might think. And the idea of people migrating to Toronto, making, whether it's a tourist kind of pilgrimage, or it's a long-term, I want to move here and make it as a punk rocker, like, that isn't a bad thing. You need a lot of that happening in very many different subcultures and very many different, ways of relating to people's current walks of life to make a city work. You need people kind of coming in. And this speaks to something else that I really feel strongly about, which is that Toronto has become, I think, a little bit spoiled by the fact that it has been constantly growing for a very long time and doesn't actually have to think about how to attract people or give them a life that is enjoyable, because it will grow no matter what, because this is where the jobs are and this is where the excitement is and all of that. But at a certain point, you do need to start thinking about, like, how do we attract people when things are a little more lean? And the way that you attract people is you provide amenities, you provide subcultures, you provide experiences that make life worth living. And that is often how economic and urban renewal happen, as a place starts to, shrink, essentially. People move away, it becomes cheaper, and then a bunch of cool stuff happens and people move back in. Well, why don't we preempt that a little bit and make sure that there's actually cool stuff here, so that the next time there is a recession, which we technically are in, there is something that's going to attract people when the time comes for that renewal to happen.
For so long, we've been able to lean off of the hope of, economy goes brr, the software jobs are going to keep growing, the finance jobs are going to keep growing. And then pandemic happened, and all those office workers realized that maybe they don't want to live in downtown Toronto anymore. And you cease to be able to just rely on housing being the base of your economy and having people just living in Toronto because that's the default, that's what you do in a competitive, national landscape. I moved, it was a biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. I moved to Calgary off of, the thought of competitive cities. And I think that's something that in a post-crisis world, people are more willing to consider is this the city for me? Is this really putting forward the kind of culture, the kind of life that I want? And absent the kinds of culture, the excitement, the community, well, then why would I stick around? Why wouldn't I go? I mean, this is where I think you actually end up seeing Calgary has a thriving punk scene. You know, you'll go to some of these bars downtown, and I'll see you're walking through. It's like you're at like a conjoined funeral. Is all the number of people wearing all in black, just crowding the street in a way that I don't think you even quite see as much in Toronto anymore. Because well, it's hard, it's expensive to live here, and so I'm very optimistic about this. But what do you think is the thing that we then bring in more of those people, you know, in combination with protecting some of these landmarks, these cultural landmarks like Sneaky Dee's? How do we fill in? How do we help maintain Sneaky Dee's so that it continues to grow? That this isn't that it's not just a heritage designation that makes sure it stays culturally relevant. How do you fill in to make sure that it has a community beyond just what's enshrined in the law? What are some of the pro-housing developments that we need to see, pro-housing changes in the law that we need to be seeing, do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, oh God, it's going to sound like a total
Yeah, I know, sorry,
stereotype. Because like I'm gonna sound gentle density, but like gentle density, you know, like missing middle housing. Again, I honestly, you know, maybe the community of Nest, which is like the nightclub next to the RBC, next to Sneaky D's, maybe their community similarly could have rallied if they really felt like they were coming down. But it's a pretty new establishment. Like the developer could, if they had actually intended to build housing and they hadn't lied on their application, you know, that developer could have made this proposal with 4 parcels and, you know, done something with the city to say, you know, parcel off just the Sneaky D's one, which is about the size of like a privately owned public space, and, you know, either sell it at a discount or donate it or whatever to like create some sort of like, I don't know, cultural land trust thing. There's 100 things that they could do in exchange for more density on their sites. Elsewhere, the 4 sites, so you could get the equivalent in density.
What's the status? And tell me, Dan, again, maybe the thesis of this podcast is, you know, I'm a guy from Toronto who has been unengaged in Toronto politics for the past 3 years, and now I'm trying to catch up. Yeah. What's the status of the yellow belt that you? What's the etymology of that term, by the way?
Okay, so the yellow belt, I think it was Gil Meslin who came up with it, and basically, if you look at the zoning maps of Toronto, anything in yellow, kind of like the Lion King, anywhere the sun touches its kingdom sort of thing.
Right.
Anywhere you see in yellow is a stable neighborhood, and ye shall not build there. And so it's a large part of the city, and it's the reason why Toronto looks so lumpy from kind of aerial shots.
So what's the conversation around that? So in Calgary, it was a big thing, and they recently reneged on this, but they, as a right, they called it blanket rezoning. Any place where there's existing single-family housing, they upzoned it to 4 stories, like 6 units on that same parcel of land. Is something like that? Has that ever been discussed in Toronto? Is that politically viable?
Yeah, it's happened.
Yeah.
But the thing with Toronto is amalgamation has resulted in some certain political realities. So multiplexes, downtown only. Corner stores, downtown only. The concession that had to be made on each of those to get them through was the suburbs got to stay suburban. And I mean, I'm torn on this. Good things so rarely happen in Toronto that something incrementally good makes me happy. It does not make everyone happy. Some people see that as a huge loss, and the fact that we have this kind of growing idea of 2 Torontos, where basically there is the downtown, which acts like a city, and then there's all the little bits around the edges that act like a different city. I can also appreciate that argument, but again, I will crawl towards goodness instead of just letting it die. And, you know, that is just kind of the reality of where we're at. So it is happening slowly. I also really like and respect our current chief planner, Jason Thorne, who managed to make a lot of these changes in Hamilton successfully. I think he is, again, too incrementalist for a lot of people, but I think that incrementalism is done strategically. He knows when he can win, and he knows how to make his wins kind of modular so he can stack new stuff onto stuff. So if he wins one time, he can put another thing into the box. I think he's actually used that analogy before, as he makes a bunch of boxes and he can put different things in those boxes. But I would compare it to Lego, because it's kind of building upwards. Like he has kind of a modular system for policy change, which I, again, can appreciate. If you're a patient and you've like felt like Toronto isn't moving fast enough for a very long time, that would drive you nuts. But for me, I like that anything is moving at all, and I think change in these cases is often exponential, so it will accelerate. hopefully.
This was
Fingers
the
crossed.
lesson I definitely took away from the rezoning debacle on Calgary, which I'll explain briefly because why would you focus on Calgary politics when you get to live in Toronto? They went very ambitiously, and Calgary, of course, is like all of Etobicoke. It's just all suburbs. It's to the nodes and spokes to a much worse degree. So the staff, I think, proposed a very ambitious way to address that housing shortage, which was, to do this blanket rezoning. But then that was so politically unpopular by these, very suburban folks that basically, all of council was wiped out except for a few chosen few. And that rezoning was, just brought back to the pre-blanket rezoning levels. That's what you risk when you pursue these dramatic changes. And sometimes by pursuing that incremental approach, you ensure that it has a longer life and makes it a lot harder just to, rip out that policy when the next council comes along. On that point, maybe switching gears a little bit here, Dan, if that's all right. You're a read of council right now. You're a read of the mayoralship, especially. How do you feel about Chow? How do you feel about Bradford? Are you a Corey DeVille man, perhaps? Are we going to see a surprise entrant from someone who has Instagram followers? What's your read on the political scene right now?
I think that I recently had someone tell me that they felt that this was not a year of change or an election year of change, and that there's going to be like a pretty big generational turnover the next time around. And I am coming around to that theory. I think that the incumbency advantage is very strong, but I also think that this was a shortened term because for the mayor at least, since young John Tory could not control himself. And so, Chow hasn't even had a...
Way to speak on that, Dan. What do you mean by that? Sorry.
The man had urges and he acted upon them, and then he had to leave.
But he threatened to come back, which was entertaining.
Which was glorious for a brief moment. We almost had... But there's another John Tory running in the beaches for...
It's very true. But you got to get that.
We will never... the thing that's nice about these guys with Sorry, my dog is...
It's okay.
These guys with the generational names is we'll never be without a John Tory. There'll always be one around somewhere.
Yeah, it's gonna be like Dune. There's gonna be a John Tory, the worm in 3,000 years, who's the God King of Toronto. It'll be very exciting. Yeah.
And if the line ever dies out, one will just emerge from the lake. It's just. It's an inevitability.
Yeah, talk about Lego, John Tory. I think I agree with you. My working kind of theory right now is that in every polity, we're going to see this sort of massive disruption based off of the internet generation deciding to start campaigning via the tools of the day, and the previous generation just isn't going to be able to catch up. I think you can see this already, where it's shocking to me that in 2026 you look through some of these counselors and their online identity is non-existent, and it makes sense because they've been operating off of a version of politics which was just primarily ground game and traditional media, and based off of the demographics of our current council, they're not going to be very familiar with social media. But of course, as the boomers go away and more people age into voting age who are digital natives, that social media is going to be more and more important. So it feels like in every city, there's just going to be this one election where that Instagram demographic reaches maturity, and anyone who existed before, if they weren't able to catch up, then there's going to be gone. I will give Olivia Chow a lot of credit. I think she's someone who's been able to manage this evolution fairly well. Her Sneaky Dee's post of her eating nachos at Sneaky's, that was delightful.
I will say this about that post.
Yeah.
I will say this about that post. Some people have found it weird and unsettling because it's her just crunching nachos and then music fades in. I think, everyone we talked to wanted to defer to the local councillor. No one wanted to really pile on into a situation that was not their business. And so the mayor, as far as I know, said nothing about Sneaks before we got an agreement or before something happened. However, whoever shot it and whoever chose the music chose a song by Gob, And Tom, the main guy from Gob, also briefly in Sum 41, was actually one of the people who recorded a video testimonial for me on behalf of Sneaky Dee. So someone was paying attention and like did a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the activists and the community supporters, and clearly like they ate it up. Like she's got, I don't know, 20,000+ likes on that right now. Like people will say that she's pandering, people will say she came in at the last minute, but like there was kind of a slyness to it that I can appreciate. Someone was kind of winking at the camera while that happened, so that was very funny to me. I can also appreciate why that frustrated some people, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, here you are to come when everything's worked out, you're making a little wink wink post. Yeah, that's politics.
That's politics, and it's also how the mayor specifically works. Like, I think this was like a thing that was very weird for both me and for because again, I've only kind of been annoying politicians for a shorter amount of period of time. Like, I've mostly kind of kept to myself till recently. But on the corner store thing, like Mayor Chow was not present until she was very present, and then she was incredibly effective, and she is the one who passed the ultimate motion that helped us. And so it was very odd for both me and the corner store owner whose store I was trying to save that the person who ended up sharing a coffee with us and celebrating, there's a photo of me, sitting and smiling with the mayor, the chief planner, the local councilor, mayor, local councilor, me. Yeah, 4 people. 4 of us sitting together. And like, as far as that store owner was concerned, the city was trying to shut her down like 2 years ago. And now every single person who had a hand, as far as she knew, because like, again, the city is just kind of this one large abstract entity to most people. Suddenly all the people that were like the visible face of that entity were like sitting there congratulating her. She was like, what the hell is, like, this is very surreal. She was super happy that they were there. Don't get me wrong. Very grateful, all that. But like, that is how often the mayor just seems to function, especially because we don't have in Toronto as powerful a mayor as, people wish that we had like a Zoran, but like there are ways that maybe Chow could be more forceful, but at the end of the day, the mayor here is not exactly a figurehead, but like has a little less pull than one might think.
For sure. One vote on council and, even some of those strong mayor abilities is so dependent upon, the Ford government allowing those powers to be leveraged. I think that one hope I have, and, kind of, again, one of the theses of this show is that we are witnessing hopefully the emergence of a more engaged local news media where, the 2000s brought about the end of any sort of local news coverage. Not the end, but, people just aren't as engaged. So it's led to this inherent dynamic where people are skeptical of city decisions because the only time they hear about what's going on in the city is when, it's personally affecting them, usually in some sort of negative way. But the hope is that when you establish people as characters, when you discuss the evolution of these processes, then people are a little more understanding, hopefully a little more forgiving, hopefully a little more educated, such that, half of the city isn't talking like a conspiracy theorist whenever something is going against their, best wishes. Maybe that is a foolish optimism on my part, but, I'll go with it.
That's exactly that's the premise of like my kind of greater project, Another Glass Box, was what if change was not a bad thing, or what if civic change was not a bad thing, was, the basic thesis was that if you don't know why you feel like you have no agency in your city, you will disengage and you will not participate and you will resent the city and you will either move out or you'll start participating in what I think is like kind of antisocial behavior, whether that's like voting for people who want to just tear everything down or whatever. That's not that there be danger.
Starting, an Instagram page called Integrity TO.
I didn't say it, but anyhow, I got, holy smokes. There was this page today. I'm not going to name which page it was, but there was a group of cranks who really dislike me because I like the Bathurst bus lanes.
Right.
These guys today, every single victory post about Save Sneaky Dees, they were like, this guy's actually pro-development. He's the reason Sneaky Dees was in danger in the first place. He is actually a bad guy. He's a snake in the midst. And I was like, you are commenting that I am pro-developer on the post where I say I killed this development. Like, do you understand how... Anyhow, whatever. There are people out
'Cause
there like
they're-
that, though, right? Like they feel like the city is out to get them. They feel like they don't understand the processes, and so instead they describe it as this like grand narrative of villains and heroes and blah blah blah. When really, like, there's a bunch of people trying to work their jobs. There are definitely heroes and villains. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of it is just people like getting a paycheck, maybe getting a little bit lazy every so often, and you have to give them a little kind of like wake up nudge that it's like, you work for people, the people, and like we have certain desires, and like, you know, help us. And I would also say, sorry, one last thing about that is, because I make it sound like they're being lazy, I would also say that that kind of inertia and that ennui that sometimes exists both within councillor staff and city staff comes from things like the OLT removing their ability to affect, for instance, development, or, you know, small budgets, not enough resources. Like, I'm not blaming them specifically, but if you as a citizen provide them the opportunity to be like, I want to do this cool thing, I want to, I don't know, Josh Matlow and put on a pro cycling movie in City Hall chambers and invited people to come for free. I've this thing with Sneaky Dee's, like the staff in Diane's office, for instance, who are getting to work on it are kind of like, this is unprecedented. I get to do like this weird project. Like, they're actually almost kind of grateful that you're giving them the opportunity to shake things up. So if you provide them with like, here's a cool project where you could make a difference in people's lives and get a huge political win out of it, you'd be surprised that some people are enthusiastic. You will also maybe not be surprised to find out that some politicians are like, nothing ever changes, everything is bad, go home, and they give you like a condescending like boot out the door. But if you find the right people, you can have a lot of fun.
I was just talking with Rodney Chan about the Church Street pedestrianization.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the lesson. I think everyone has a story who's ever done anything with municipal government, is that there'll be, you know, that one person that you touch base with who will be like, okay, this is what you need to do. And you can tell, like, I really do believe, like, no one goes into city government, or few people do, staffers, unless they have a legitimate care about the city that they represent. There are good jobs that pay well as well. But, you know, I think these are typically people who are at least, you know, have some hope to do something good in the world, but they feel so just downtrodden. And you know, it's bad enough to work at a large organization. It's even worse when you got, you know, 3 million people telling you you're an asshole on a daily basis too sometimes. So when I think one of those staffers gets a chance to interact, you know, with someone like you, Dan, or with someone like Rodney, or, you know, with many, you know, dozens and dozens of great activists in the city, you can see them come alive and say, because now all of a sudden, you know, they've got someone on the outside that can hopefully, you know, help them do that stuff. It's like Zodiac, you know, or something, when like Jake Gyllenhaal starts like trying to go through and figure out who the killer was all those years later. You know, like there's this power between the staffers who are in government and the activists outside, and it's when you're able to collaborate between those two that I think real change can happen in the city. But the issue, though, is that while you know, the city has been losing agency, like with the OLT, like with amalgamation that's been happening since Harris, simultaneously, those same political forces are impugning the motivations of city, to saying that they're bad people, such that there's so many activists who could be doing such good work, but because we've all been fed this discourse that the city is incompetent, that there's no reason to, no one ever tries. And that's why I think then you'll, like you say, it's you hear it a lot. It's a very specific thing. It's folks saying, I haven't even been doing it that long. This is my first thing. It's always like, this was the first time I ever tried to reach out about this, and it went swimmingly. This was Rodney was like, I thought it was going to take like 10 years to get pedestrianization. We did it in a year. And I think that, you know, that's what the lesson people need to take, that the city is not actually as scary as it is. Beyond all the council chambers, all the pomp and circumstance, at the end of the day, there are just real people who you'd be shocked how much they're willing to work with you, as long as you're not an asshole to them. And I think that's maybe the step that people forget sometimes, is they start off throwing piss in the face and then are surprised when they don't get anything done, you know?
That's the other thing. And like, I think, you know, I do know the difference between a carrot and a stick. Is one thing. And I think the other thing, and I've offered this, like that same group I mentioned earlier who's so angry at me, I was like, I'll sit down to have a coffee with you and teach you how I've won in the past, because you seem very angry that you're getting nowhere. And, you know, they've rejected that. They're like, you're an agent of the city, blah, 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 because it is alien to them that you can cooperate and get things done in a harmonious way. Like, to them, it is, these guys are the enemy. And if you are able to work with them even once on one single file, even if you're critical of the city in many other ways, you are therefore like an accomplice, which, whatever. Like, you're never going to get anything done in that way. You're going to alienate any potential allies. And one of the things that's weirdest about municipal politics, in my mind at least, is sometimes you find yourself with very strange allies. Like, there were people I worked with on the Sneaky Dees thing who I have said, I won't say, I've said things about them publicly.
For sure. Okay. Yeah.
And you know, I had to swallow my pride and they had to swallow theirs, and we sat together and we worked it out, and like, that was fine. I had a phone call with the leader of a pretty large progressive organization recently where they said a bunch of my tweets insulted them, and I was like, oops, didn't mean to do that. You know, like, I get told a lot that I've insulted people that I didn't even know I was insulting, and I think that I sometimes need to shut up, but it is fun. And
I always like to say there's a little bit of kayfabe. You know, I think there's a little bit of a performance, and I fall victim to this in terms of my own social media. You know, I think the last thing I put on Threads was, you know, I screenshotted someone's profile picture and then just replied to their comment that I didn't like. You know, I'm not a perfect person online.
The one that got me recently that like was mortifying was, there was a newspaper article that came out. It was a headline in the Toronto Star. It said, will the Bentway be the next High Line? The Bentway being that underground, under the Gardner Park, and the High Line being the one that's above kind of the old rail network in New York. It's a beautiful, award-winning park. And I said, no, based on location and the fact that one of them gets exposure to sunlight, never. Like, they're just two different things. And I went on in subsequent tweets to be like, that is why what the Bentway has done with programming is so impressive. They've put like skate parks and they've done like amazing fashion shows. Like, we should give them credit for being an amazing thing in Toronto that's unique instead of comparing them to New York all the time.
Yes.
And then I forgot about it for like 2 years. And then the last design firm I was at, we won a job with Bentway, and we had a little first kickoff meeting. Their then co-CEO sends me a message on LinkedIn with a screenshot of my tweet from like 2 years ago. He's like, I thought you looked familiar. Apparently it circulated around their office. They think about it a lot. And I didn't think about it once since that day. I turned so red, and I was in my office and I was like, oh boy, how many of those are out there where I've just like planted small landmines of personal insults and injuries that I'm going to have to deal with later. I just got one from a friend who was like, this sounds kind of in favor of this politician. I was like, I thought I was making fun of them, but okay. I don't know.
I never expected anyone to read these things, you know? Like, what do you, that's your fault, I say, for consuming the stuff I publish. Go read it. Go read a book.
I will say this is like someone who's like getting called like an online activist or a urbanist influencer or whatever. Like, one of the things that I say when I'm like, I have like a little lecture. I'm giving it actually on July 22nd with more neighbors. But like, it's a lecture I give kind of like to classrooms, to activist groups, to basically whoever asks me to do it. But like, it's about kind of just how you build a presence that can actually make change off of the internet. And, you know, one of the things I say is like, if you share about yourself and your philosophy and what you're doing, the best thing that can happen is people know who you are before you get into the room, so that you've already gained that trust and you could just start working kind of immediately instead of, but then people, strangers in public, will talk to me about things I've said, or like, I was walking down the street, a guy who I know him. He's an acquaintance in my neighborhood. We've talked before, but like, I wasn't paying attention. I was like, got my headphones on or whatever, and I just hear, congratulations on Sneaky Dees, Dan. I was like, why are you? What is happening? Like, every single time I'm like, how dare you? And then I'm like, wait, no, never mind. I live very publicly online, so like, it's a very strange experience to do any of this stuff.
When I was trying to pedestrianize a street in Calgary, it was the first time I was on like local news, not just in the background. And I was like, oh, we need pedestrianize this, blah blah blah. Also, like, they loved having me as a face of urbanism in Calgary, because every article that was written about me was like, Christopher Chiasson, who moved here from Toronto last year. I'm like, okay, maybe that is my face.
He's coming with those liberal ideas.
I was also like, come on, like, guys with glasses, like, we're a real target. Different thing in Calgary. People in Toronto don't realize how good we have it as the spectacally inclined. In Calgary, if I ever saw a guy with glasses, I'd be like, friend, brother, we're safe. I can talk to you now. In Toronto, you don't have as much of that.
That's its own subculture, right?
yeah. That is the punk of Calgary. Anyways, I digress. But so I did this interview where I was talking about pedestrianization on this one street in Calgary. That night, I'm like walking along that street, just going to a bar. Somebody yells out of their pickup truck, "Buy a car, Chris." So the version of that, Dan, I think, if that's what you get, as long as when you start getting the yells or you start getting the jeers, that's a little scary. I think you're on the right call.
Yeah, but you do get that too. I think, it's actually how I end the presentation every time is you do take there's a personal toll to being this public online. Like I get credit for doing things that are clearly communal. Like, I didn't do anything on my own in any of these cases, but I get this like kind of build up from whether it's media or other people who are like, thank you for what you're doing. And it's like, that's great, but like, it wasn't just me, one. But then that flip side of that is you become a little bit of a target for like, I like to joke sometimes that you get all the drawbacks of celebrity with like none of the benefits. Like, and so, there's people out there who seem to very vehemently dislike me, and I sometimes feel a little bit paranoid that they're like, I don't know who they are. They're an anonymous avatar. They could be on a different part of the world, or they could be someone sitting beside me on the bus. So that is kind of a weird part of like living semi-publicly on the internet. I still think it's been fun and worth it, but I don't recommend the lifestyle necessarily.
Social media is like bad. I think it ruins people's mental health. For me, it's been very like personally beneficial though. So Dan, I definitely need to learn more from you, and hopefully, direct my small but growing audience towards some causes that they can do some tangible impacts on. Maybe that can be our kind of last rounding up question. As someone who, has been very effective in their activism, like, what's that advice you give to say, I see a problem in my neighborhood, now what?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. One is I have like just a bit of a problem where I get like a little bit obsessive about certain topics. I got really mad about AI avatars, slop, all that stuff.
Right, yeah.
And I created this like cutout mask of,
yeah.
it's like, this guy's name is Douglas. He's an AI avatar that like you can pilot to like sell products online, and someone used it to fight bus lanes, and I got like super mad about like the fact that it wasn't just one group, and like that one group is very angry at me for pointing it out. But I want to just say, like, it's not about you specifically. It's about the fact that like as a society, we are allowing people to use AI in a way that's like kind of crazy, in my opinion, and I think we should put some guardrails in place. And so to make that point, I printed out a giant face of a fake man, and I wore it around, and I took photos of it. And that is like a little bit weird, but I think that one of the things that I do very effectively is when I do commit to one of these topics, I really have fun with it, and I show people that I'm having fun with it. I actually think engaging in civic politics at the municipal level can be a blast. It can be so rewarding. Like the moment that we were told, Diane Sachs's office called everyone involved with the activism on Sneaky Dee's at like 4 on Friday, told us to get to Sneaky Dee's as soon as we possibly could, told us she had to leave pretty quickly for some sort of dinner, but like they shot a quick video with her, the main activists. And then, people were like doing shots and cheering. Like that was a euphoric moment. Like it was crazy how people were feeling. And so, you get one or two of those wins and you get a little bit addicted. And so like, you just need to get out there and try it a little bit. I often call it like A/B testing, where like, I tried this campaign, it failed. I tried this thing, it worked. I'm going to try that again. And with the Sneaky Dee's thing specifically, just because it's kind of top of mind, like when I reached out to my friend Mac, who was like, again, in this kind of core group of activists, the way I said it was like, look, at some point I've always thought about like wanting to do some sort of civics course or recording of how I do things, and I wanted to like distribute it to people for free. If you guys allow me to kind of participate in your group, like it would basically allow me to kind of test flight a syllabus, and we can find out if it is effective in helping you guys or not. And not to toot my own horn, but I think we did pretty good.
Yeah.
And but that's exciting to me that it's like somewhat replicable, that the things that I do, the kind of like thought processes I have, is something I can transfer to others, and hopefully it helps them feel as excited and motivated to make positive change in their communities as I feel. That's what I would say. Is I do have this kind of like obsessive like need to win. I don't know if it's competitive, but it's like I want things to be better. Yeah. And when I see what I call, like it's a common term, but I almost feel like a synesthesia around like the idea of a golden path. Like if I see a way to win on an urban topic, like I can't let it go. I just hone in on it. Yeah.
What I've noticed now is that through like anything that I do now, what I place at the foundation is like, how can I do something with people? Like, how can I do something that I'm actually like meeting new people consistently? And then from there, it just feels like good things always happen. Because especially on these issues, just like everyone's nice, it's good people. Like if you want to like make the most number of friends, get really into like urbanism activism, because inherently it's a group of people who really care about like living and having like that's what urbanism is, right? Like urbanism is how do we design our physical spaces so that people are as happy as possible. So that means that the people who tend to be like into these issues, I think, are always in pursuit of a good vibe, not people who are just trying to get home as soon as possible. So I really so Dan, I really enjoyed talking with you today.
I got one last thing to say about that though.
Please.
Which is I also think that people look at like what Rodney said, like I just did this for the first time and it was no problem, or like me saying that thing about corner stores. And like I've known Rodney for a number of years. He's been thinking about urbanism and talking to folks in that space for many years now. Mm-hmm. And I spent about 8 years publishing Another Glass Box before my victory. I would also say that none of this comes overnight. You have to go out and meet people, participate in their projects, learn from them, and then when the opportunity comes along to do something really cool, you will be completely prepared with all the skills and all the connections and all that. But like it is also, I just don't want people to feel discouraged. They're like, I'm going to become an urbanist tomorrow. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to do a bunch of work. You're going to do a bunch of boring stuff. You're going to lose a lot. You're going to like have a bunch of stuff fizzle out and die on the vine. And then the right thing will happen and everyone will be like, well, where did you come from? And it's like, I've been here the whole time. So yeah.
That is a good point. Yeah. I mean, if you're don't get dejected if you're not able to, successfully fund a new subway line on your first tweet.
None of us do it right the first time.
Dan, where can people find you online?
I am at Another Glass Box on Instagram, on Twitter, on Blue Sky. On my website is anotherglassbox.com. I'm on the internet a lot. You'll find me.
Really appreciate this conversation, Dan. Thanks so much.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much for Dan Seljak for coming on the show today. If you like the show, please review us. You'd be shocked how happy you could make me if you left a review on this show. Even a negative one is always appreciated.